Okay, great. Thank you everyone for attending this great webinar this morning. I am Linda Knowlton, the FAMP president, and I'm just thrilled to have Ned Hale with us. I have known Ned for a number of years here in Fort Myers, Florida, and he is always a good friend of FAMP's and willing to take his time and do webinars like this that are so important to our industry. So I'm going to take a few minutes and just introduce Ned. Ned Hale is the owner of Hale Law Group. He's a native of Los Angeles, California. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Chicago, a Master's of Business Admin from the Illinois Institute of Technology, and a Juris Doctorate from Chicago Kent College of Law. Prior to entering law school, Ned was a commercial real estate broker with C.B. Richard Ellis. He's been a licensed attorney since 1997. Over the years, he's handled hundreds of Florida transactional and litigation matters, ranging from real estate and business to wills and trust. Since 2002, Ned has been teaching real estate law to realtors at the Realtor Association of Greater Fort Myers and the Beach. He has also lectured on the law to various trade groups, including the Bonita Estero Association of Realtors, CCIM, and Fort Myers chapter. Ned was one of our speakers at our convention trade show last year on the homestead information, which was very informative, and we've had a lot of good press from that as well, and feedback. He serves Lee, Charlotte, and Collier County. So as I said, I'm personally just thrilled to have you here, Ned, today. But I did want to ask you one quick question before we go in. Do you know what February is? February 1st starts the month of?
Black History Month.
National Cherry Month.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yes, Ned loves cherries, and he has all this. Yeah, he's a fan of cherries. So
I had 3 of them this morning.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, I am going to just let you take it away, Ned. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Linda. I really do. Okay, folks, you can all hear me? All good? So generally what we do is everyone is muted, and I'm the only speaker. And what we're going to do then today, as Linda said, I'm Ned Hale, board certified real estate attorney. We are going to talk today about the changes. We're going to be here an hour, maybe less, maybe more. It really depends. To the FAR bar contract. What is the FAR bar contract? It's the standard contract used by most realtors on residential deals in Florida. Different associations, some different associations, including down here in Naples, they have their own form. But I'm telling you, most associations, including the Fort Myers Association, including most other associations, I know Port Charlotte Association also, they use the FAR bar contract. Well, that was recently changed at the end of last year. And where does it? Yes, please, any questions you have, please put in chat. This format, the advantage of this format is, we can log on from anywhere all over the state. The disadvantage is, there's no room synergy, and that's just kind of the way it is. We've got Mike Pearson here helping us out, and I really appreciate that. So what we're going to do is, just as usual, okay, here's the big picture. They change the FAR bar contract approximately every 3 to 5 years, and they always change the financing section. And you know what? They almost always rewrite it. And quite candidly, sometimes some of the changes are good usually, and sometimes the changes aren't very good. I'll be just totally candid with you. Sometimes I agree with the changes, sometimes I don't. But I can't control that, and neither can you. Unlike a realtor, you can't say to a buyer or seller, hey, we need to change this in the contract. We need to change this, that in the financing section. You cannot say that. You're given the contract as you are by your clients. So what I want to do is, really, there's no substitute. After years of teaching these classes, there's no substitute for just reading the contract. But I want to do 2 things. I've got the new financing section, and that's all we're going to talk about today, right? We're only going to talk about the financing section. That is what impacts you folks. We're going to go over that. Now, having said that, okay, well, I also want to show you the red line changes, how many changes they made, okay, to it. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to it'll be amazing to you when you see how much they changed it. The best way again to do this is to just review it, the actual contract, a clean version. We're going to do that. But let's share the screen, okay? Let's share the screen right now on Look at this. Look at, we're going down here. That should be in front of you. Look what they did. Look, here's the financing section. They took out all kinds of verbiage under cash, apparently saying now, taking out the part where it says you can, there's no financing contingency. It does say that, but they took out if buyer obtains any loan for a purchase price, buyer acknowledges the terms imposed by the lender shall not affect. All it says now is this is a cash transaction with no financing contingency. But my simple question to you folks is, does that mean now you can't get a loan if you check that box? Folks, I'm not so sure it does say that. It says this is a cash transaction with no financing contingency. Where does it prohibit a loan? There's no prohibition of a loan. So as far as I'm concerned, they can still get a loan, but it's not contingent on getting the loan, right? So I want to make sure you understand that. Cash transaction, no financing contingency, but you need to understand that I think you can still get a loan. Take a look. You're going to check the box if it's contingent on a loan. Look at all these changes. We're not going to speak about all the changes at this second. Again, I'm going to go through this on a clean version, but obviously crossouts are crossouts, and then additions are there. They're mostly in green. Some of them are in purple and blue. The color doesn't matter, but look at all the changes here. Look at all the changes. Look at this. They've rewritten the whole thing. Isn't that crazy? But it isn't crazy. They do it every iteration. And this form came out again late last year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop that share, right? It's going to go back to me. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of that document. I'm going to get out of that document. And then what I'm going to do is, hold on one second. I need to open up the other document. Okay, it's open. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to minimize that. Let's see here. Whoops. I've got the document there. Okay, now what we've got here is I'm going to go ahead, and again, any questions, please go ahead and chat them, right? Please go ahead and chat any questions, but we're going to go over now the actual clean contract, and I'm going to talk about some of the changes, and obviously we're going to talk about how it impacts you. So here it is. You should see the screen share, right? You see the screen share? Okay, good. So what we're going to do is I'm going to minimize this a little bit, get that a little bit out of the way. All right, so let's take a look. Again, take a look at the clean version, folks. This is a cash transaction with no financing contingency. Where's the prohibition of getting a loan? It's not prohibited. But obviously, if you check that box, guess what? It's not contingent on a loan either. So if the buyer can get a loan, no problem. The buyer can get a loan. But if there is no loan, if the lender doesn't fund or whatever, then the buyer's deposit is at risk. So let's read on. More often, you're going to see this box checked. The contract is contingent upon, if left blank, then 30 days after the effective date. That 30 days may not be enough time. For a while on this contract, the default was 45. This says 30 days. So that's your loan period. After the effective date, buyer obtaining what? You check a box ordinary if it's conventional, which most are, to purchase the property for what? Most loans are fixed rate. Interest rate, you put in the interest rate that this whole deal is contingent upon, not to exceed blank. What is the interest rate? Okay, and for a term of, if left blank, then 30 years. Most of them are 30-year fixed, but you got to put in the interest rate there. Don't put in market or prevailing. Okay, and two, the mortgage broker receiving an here's a big change, friends. Any appraisal issues have to be dealt with up front. In other words, they changed this. They added this, line 94. Within the 30 days, you have to get that appraisal or other alternative valuation. Now, if the lender, your lending source, does not require an appraisal and they'll take a broker opinion of value, that is acceptable. Okay, if either is required by lender, sufficient to meet the terms required. That is a huge change. The old form said on the back end, if it didn't appraise, even after you've given loan approval, you could cancel. It no longer says that. Appraisal issues must be resolved up front within the 30 days. Can you see how on your side of the business that could be problematic? Because what if you don't get the appraisal in time? Appraisers are really backed up right now. I can assure you of that. I think you know that. But get the big picture there is, if there's an appraisal issue, get it resolved within the loan approval period. That's a seismic change because there's no canceling on the back end once loan approval is given. All right, that's a big deal. Loan appraisal issues resolved up front. Number 2, line 97, this hasn't changed much. Make application for financing within, if left blank, in 5 days. These are calendar days, right? Calendar days, unless the 5 days end on a weekend, they carry over. You have to use good faith and diligent effort to get the loan approval. It does not fully define diligent effort and good faith. It says it right here. For purposes, diligent effort includes, but is not limited to. So there could be other things that constitute diligent effort and good faith. But it says furnishing timely all documents and information required by buyer's mortgage broker and lender and paying for appraisal and other fees. That's not the only way you can show good faith. They're giving that as an example of good faith. I have litigated this where the buyer says, I couldn't get a loan, I used good faith. Seller calls bull and say, no, you didn't use good faith. And guess what? There's case law on that. You know what the case law says? This is too complicated to apply a litmus test. You're going to have to take this on a case-by-case situation. Does the judge, if there's a fight over diligent effort and good faith, what does the judge or jury believe? Does the judge or jury believe that you did, based on you filing applications, doing paperwork, that you use good faith and diligent effort or not? Okay, it's a question of fact. You can say, and you're going to say you use good faith and diligent effort. If they say no, then you got to fight. And then people lawyer up. And then the only ones usually get ahead are the lawyers in most legal fights, right? Over contracts, right? So I wanted to point that out. Diligent effort. Okay. Buyer shall, not may, friends, line 106. Buyer must, on written request, keep the seller and the broker, they mean the real estate broker for the seller, fully informed about the status. If they are asked by the seller, what is the status of the application, the loan processing, the appraisal, what's going on, they're required to respond and give that information. Now, you know how this plays out. Often the seller may reach out to you and ask you, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Lender, what's going on? And what do you guys always say? I can't tell you. I'm not going to violate all kinds of rules because you guys can't generally talk to anyone other than your client as to what the status is. And so you don't have to. You didn't sign this contract, right? Your lending source didn't sign this contract. So you don't have to respond. In fact, you probably shouldn't. You guys usually won't respond to requests from the seller for information on the status of the loan. But the buyer must. The buyer must respond, right? The buyer must. Okay, so buyer, okay, here, it even goes on to say that the buyer's authorizing you, the mortgage broker, you, the lender, to disclose the status. And what you guys usually say? I don't care what it says. Federal law prohibits me from doing that. That's what you usually tell me. All right. So just because you're authorized by the buyer to do it doesn't mean that you should. And most of you won't, because you're not allowed to disclose anything about a loan, in just what you tell me. You guys are the experts. I don't know. But what you guys have told me over the years is I can't be talking to a seller or a seller's broker about my client's credit, about the status of their loan. If you feel like you can, then you're authorized to do it, but you don't have to do it. Just because you're authorized to do to disclose information about the loan application, the loan processing, the appraisal. Just because you're authorized to do it doesn't mean you have to. Where did you sign this? Nowhere. So that is something that if you're in doubt, go talk to your manager or a higher up in your company to say, well, number one, can I legally disclose this information to the seller? Number two, even though I can legally, should I? Right? Those are decisions you have to make. Buyers authorizing you to do it. Okay. So what it goes on to say is within the loan approval period, remember that's the 30 days by default. You need to have a conversation with the buyer's agent to see if 30 days is enough. You could put in whatever's negotiated there. Line 89, whatever's negotiated there, you can put in, right? If within the loan approval period, the default is 30 days, buyer obtains loan approval, doesn't define loan approval, right? There's no definition. That too is up to the judge or jury if there's a fight to decide was this loan approval or not. Doesn't define it. If during the loan approval period, if within the 30 days, the buyer notifies prior to the seller, prior to expiration, right? Nowhere does it say, folks, make no mistake. It says if within the loan approval period, buyer obtains loan approval, that's an undefined term. That's not defined in the contract. A loan approval is whatever you think it is, and if there's a fight, it's whatever the judge or jury says it is. You shall notify of same in writing before the 30 days, right? All you need to say is I got loan approval. And in fact, the way the contract reads, the realtor can give that notice to the other realtor and say, we got loan approval, and that's it. That's it. You got the loan approval. You've satisfied the contract. You don't, this is critical, folks. If anybody tells you you must cough up the actual loan approval letter to the seller, tell them they are wrong. Ask them where they went to law school because they're misinterpreting a legal document. Nowhere does it say you have to cough up the actual loan approval letter from you, the lender. All it says is you must notify them of receipt of the loan approval. If they say we want to see the loan approval letter, you can give it to the seller. You are not required to. That's important. A lot of people, sellers agents, think you're required to cough up the actual loan approval letter. The contract does not say that. Or line 112, if the buyer is not able to get loan approval okay, this is a big change, folks. Huge change here. As big a change as the whole appraisal issue that must be resolved up front. Get this, and this verbiage surprises me a little bit. Or if buyer is unable to obtain loan approval within the loan approval period, but line 113, get this, buyer is satisfied with their ability to obtain loan approval and proceed to closing, buyer shall deliver written notice to seller saying they have that they're, here's the air quotes, probably can't see the screen, satisfied with their ability to get loan approval. Let's stop the share a minute to make a point. It literally says, folks, even if you don't have loan approval within the loan approval period, but the buyer is, here's the air quotes, satisfied with their ability to obtain loan approval, that's good enough to satisfy the paragraph and to proceed with the transaction. That's a huge change. No other version of this contract has ever said that even if you didn't get loan approval within the loan approval period, you can proceed as long as you are satisfied. Well, how the heck are you going to know if you're satisfied that you're going to get loan approval? Who are they going to hear that from? The buyer. They're going to hear that from you. They're going to hear that from you. You're going to say, oh, Mr. Barry Buyer, you don't have loan approval, and it's 30 days. And they say, okay, well, do you think I'm going to get loan approval? And you say, I think you will. And Barry Buyer is going to say, well, then I guess I'm satisfied I'm going to get loan approval. I better let the other side know that I'm satisfied. Well, that's fine, as long as Barry Buyer gets loan approval eventually from Larry Lender. What if Larry Lender never gives loan approval? What? Well, it says it right there. You're satisfied. You want to stay in the deal. We'll get to that, right? But it's remarkable, I find, and the contract's never said. And I've been, covering the FAR contract for 24 years. And believe me, I've told you, it changes every 3 to 5. No other version has ever said you can stay in the deal without loan approval as long as you're, here's the dreaded air quotes, satisfied with your ability. Folks, they're going to ask you, Larry Lender, can I tell the seller I'm satisfied? Can you see where that puts out some liability for you? Where they're asking you, are you, Larry Lender, satisfied that I, Barry Buyer, am going to be able to get loan approval? Well, that's all fine. If you say yes, guess what? And then eventually they don't get loan approval. Guess who Barry Buyer is going to blame? They're going to blame Larry Lender. That's you. So I'm telling you, you need to be real careful about that if you're asked that question, okay? Because you don't want any what? Liability, what, maybe a lawyer suing you, nasty grams from lawyers. There's a lot of lawyers in Florida and they're looking to sue you and you and you. And I've got a Brady Bunch screen right in front of me and they're looking to sue Mike and Marcia and they're looking to sue Cindy. Yeah. No, Mike Brady, not you, Mike Pearson, not you, Mike Pearson. Because it's a Brady Bunch screen, Mike Brady and Cindy Brady and Peter Brady. Anyway, they're looking to sue a moldy sandwich if they think they can get money from it. Okay. Have you turned on the news, folks? At the evening news? Have you turned on Jeopardy? Have you turned on Wheel of Fortune? Have you turned on when you watch TV at night? Have you turned on, Family Feud? It's all a bunch of lawyers, saying, do business with me, go sue people with me. It's crazy. Get used to it. Japan makes cars, America makes lawyers, and they want to sue. Watch your liability, okay? Let's go back. I'm going to share screen again. We're going to go back. All right. However, line 115, if buyer is unable, you can't get loan approval. You can't get it within the 30 days, the loan approval period, or cannot, maybe you, if you get the loan approval, you can't meet those terms within the loan approval period, then you can terminate the contract by deliver written notice of termination. Again, it's all prior to the expiration of loan approval, whereby, if you're not in default, you get your deposit back and the deal dies, right? So you either won, so let's go over this again. You won, your options are as follows. You get loan approval, you let them know the deal proceeds. You don't have loan approval, but you're satisfied with your ability to eventually get loan approval. That's number 2, you stay in the deal. Or third, you are what? You don't get loan approval. Well, you don't get loan approval. Guess what? You need to really think about canceling and getting your deposit back within the 30 days. And folks, all of you folks, we got 44 participants right now. Probably if I keep going much longer, it's going to be 24 down to 14. Then it's just going to be me talking to myself. Okay. Folks, I'm telling you this, you need to calendar these dates because you need to let these people know. You need to understand when that 30 days is up. However, I've written articles on this. There's a 4th option here, friends. There's a 4th option, and this is what you should do. If they don't have loan approval within the loan approval period, encourage your buyer, Barry Buyer, to go to Sam Seller, and say, can we do a written extension of the loan approval period? Because you must have a written signed extension. None of this verbal, none of this, oh, we acted in good faith, okay? It's got to be a signed written extension. And that's a 4th option that they don't mention here, but it's a big one, and I've done it. And by the way, there's case law that says, what did I say? You've got to get, excuse me, a written extension. None of this, well, we all knew we needed more time. There's no problem. There's case law that says, nope, that doesn't work. It's got to be a written extension for it to be effective, right? All right, moving on. So that's it. However, don't do nothing. Do not do nothing. Line 120 is you do nothing. You didn't give any notice. You didn't cancel. You didn't say you were satisfied with your ability to get loan approval, right? You didn't get loan approval. You didn't send notice of getting loan approval. If you don't do anything, guess what happens? Pure silence means the deal proceeds as though paragraph 8A had been checked. What's 8A? Cash deal. You lose the finance. You lose the finance. If you do nothing, you lose the financing contingency. You're still in the deal. It's treated like a cash deal. Now, however, guess what? You may lose the deal because this hasn't changed. However, the seller then goes to control if you do nothing. This is only if you do nothing on line 120. If you do nothing, and don't just do nothing. Because what can happen is within 3 days after the expiration of the 30 days, the loan approval period, seller can cancel. I had that happen once in my career. Okay, that happened once. I didn't draft the contract, wasn't my fault. It was the realtor's fault. I've had that happen once in my career. It happened last year, hot market. Seller said, I can get more money, and they canceled. And the buyer was livid. That was a mistake by the realtor. The realtor should not have canceled the realtor should not have been silent. So moving on. Don't let them just do nothing, right? If line 126, buyer has timely provided the notices 8B3 above. What is that? 8B3 is right here. You've said you either got the loan approval or you're satisfied with your ability, and then you don't close, buyer loses their deposit unless what? This hasn't changed, except it's one major thing has changed, except if seller defaults, if you cannot meet the property related terms of the loan approval. And it used to say including appraisal. Now it says specifically excluding appraisal. What did I tell you? On the new form, appraisal issues have to be resolved up front. If it doesn't appraise in the back end, you can't cancel. It used to say you can cancel. Now it specifically says you can't cancel on the back end if it doesn't appraise. If you've given the notice and you don't close, okay, then you lose the deposit unless, again, the seller defaults or property related conditions of the loan approval haven't been met with, in which case you get back your deposit. So what are some property related conditions of the loan approval? What are those most recently? Remember, property related. Chat me that. What is it? Let's look at the chat. So let's see here. Chat me. What are some property related? Property related. Any property related? Title and insurance? Yeah, that's true. Property related. What about also a clear termite? Property related. Septic? Yep, that could be another one. Property related. Property related could be title. Could be a cloud on the title, something like that. Something not that the buyer went out and bought a boat and now the buyer doesn't qualify for it. That's not property related. That's stupidity related to a buyer, okay? So that's the main thing there. So if property related conditions have not been met, property related, then the buyer gets their deposit back. But do you see, just looking at the big picture on this contract, folks, do you see that the buyer can really be burned in a lot of ways? I think the contract, I remain of the position, the contract financing section is too complicated. I think it's too difficult to understand. Most realtors don't read it, and if they do, they don't understand it. I'm not on the FAR Bar committee. If I were on the committee, I would greatly simplify the whole contract including the financing section, but I'm not on the committee. So I want you to understand how critical it is to do what? Number one, make sure appraisal issues are addressed up front. Seismic change. Number two, if the buyer doesn't get loan approval within the 30 days and they're going to ask you, okay, can I say that I'm satisfied with my ability to get the loan approval? You need to really think about whether or not you're going to put yourself out on a limb, because they're going to blame you if they ultimately don't get loan approval. And by the way, if they don't ultimately get loan approval, guess what happens? Then they can't close and their deposit's gone, and they're going to come and blame you. So, again, it's too complicated. Not my fault, not your fault. We're having a class over it right now to try to discuss this and flush this out. So what are some of these questions here? If you have, okay. What if there is a condition on the loan approval that cannot eventually clear? That was answered. If you have a property related condition on the loan approval that you cannot clear, the buyer can cancel after you've given loan approval. But if it's not property related, the buyer can't cancel. They lose their deposit. Again, if they went out and bought a boat or something, or they lost their job, that's a big one too. You could have on your loan approval letters, subject to you not losing your job, subject to you getting a gift letter. What if they never get the gift letter or the money? That could be something where it was not satisfied. They didn't get their money back. I have a friend who's under house under contract. She eventually wants out and never received loan approval for the borrower. Can she go to the bar and say she's canceling the contract? The loan approval time is over. I told you that if it's within 3 days of the loan approval period, the seller can cancel. If you are still within 3 calendar days of the loan approval period, the seller can cancel. However, if you're not, then the seller can't. But guess what? Guess what? If the buyer doesn't get loan approval and can't close, guess what? You get the deposit and cancel the contract. But in your situation, again, I have a friend whose house under contract. She wants out and has never received loan approval for the borrower. Can she go to the buyer and say she's canceling the contract? It turns into a cash deal, right? But if they didn't give any notice, it proceeds as if it's a cash deal. But within 3 days of expiration of the loan approval period, the seller could have canceled, and the buyer would have gotten their deposit back, and everybody's released to liability. Now, if you're past the 3 days from the loan approval period, this 30 days we keep talking about, you can't cancel, but the buyer, there's no loan. You proceed as if it's a cash deal. They can't cancel either. Hope they get the loan approval. So, there's a lot of pressure here for everybody, isn't there? I mean, there really is. There's stress on you guys. Everybody blames the lender. Everybody blames the lender. It's the lender's fault. They stink. They're terrible. No, that's not usually the case. That's not usually the case. All of us are involved in these transactions trying to get these deals done, and most of us don't get paid much of anything unless it closes. You've got an incentive. All right. What else here? Title and insurance. You're funny. Okay.
You have lots of votes for the board to rewrite this, so that's good. One that has a follow-up on the financing contingency.
Go ahead.
You can read that. It's down near the bottom. It says, understood, the financing contingency was up 2 weeks ago. This is the one with the friend under contract.
Mm-hmm.
She has been asking for approval and hasn't received.
You don't get loan approval if you're silent. Let's look at it again. If the buyer is silent, let's look at it again. If the buyer is silent, if buyer line 120 fails to timely deliver any notice, approval, or denial, or satisfied with ability prior to the expiration loan approval period, the deal is still good. But guess what? It proceeds as though paragraph 8A above were checked. Paragraph 8A says it's a cash deal. It's a cash. You can get a loan. Again, you can still close, but you can't cancel for any reason related to not satisfying a loan approval and not satisfying any condition. You proceed as if it's cash. No ability to cancel. If your lender isn't ready, tough luck, right? That's the answer to that. I've attended a Zoom of a top tier realtor team in Boca area. They said when they represent sellers, they keep quiet, but if they don't get the loan approval in the right, they go to the seller and ask, hey, we have a backup. Do we have, so, okay, I've attended a Zoom of a top tier realtor team in Boca Raton area. They said when they represent sellers, they keep quiet, but if they don't get the loan approval in writing, timely, right, within the 30 days, they go to the seller and ask, hey, we have a backup cash. Do you want to cancel? There's nothing wrong with that. That's not unethical. I don't blame them. Maybe that's why they're a top team, because it basically says, remember, if the buyer is silent, seller has 3 calendar days after the loan approval period, the 30 days to cancel. Just 3. Just 3. So if you got a backup cash, you can cancel. Buyer gets their deposit back. Deal's off. Buyer has no argument. It's as clear as spring water what happens in that situation. So yeah, nothing wrong with that. I don't think that's unethical. That's following the contract. Let's see here. Condo association approval due to litigation, having trouble getting info requested to underwriter to clear condition. Must seller give time needed to clear this condition, or can they cancel? Excellent question. So again, it says condo association approval issues due to litigation, having trouble getting info requested by underwriter to, clear the condition. Must seller give time needed to clear this condition? I still think the seller can cancel. If that's property related. So what's property related? A condo issue with respect to litigation. So playing this out, if you guys can't lend on the back end because this property related condition hasn't been met, as far as I'm concerned, the buyer can cancel. Well, what if the buyer doesn't want to cancel? Does the seller have to give more time? In my view, no, unless you can find somewhere where the seller has defaulted. That is tough. That's an excellent question for a tough situation. A third party. I say to my clients always, folks, there's a lot of people involved, even on a basic residential transaction. A lot of moving parts. I can only control me, myself, and I. I can't control the seller. I can't control the lender. I can't control the surveyor. I can't control the homeowners association. I can't control the management company. I can't control the title underwriter. I usually can't control the title search. There's so many things I can't control. And if one of those, you're only as strong as the weakest link. If one of those doesn't do their job, it can blow the whole deal or frustrate the whole deal. So to answer your question, I think, given the facts you give me, Glenn Gordon, I don't think the seller is required to give more time, even though ultimately it's their condo association. As far as I'm concerned, no, but I smell a fight. Okay. If the buyer can't get the loan because of this, I think somebody needs to consider lawyering up and addressing that. Okay, I do. Good question. Okay. Let's see here. There is a HOA addendum that handles that. Does HOA approval fall into property related? First of all, approval by an association is usually not required for an HOA. It's almost always required for a condo. So does HOA approval fall into property related? I guess what I'm trying to say, yeah. I mean, if a buyer is not approved by a condo association, and I've seen that happen twice in my career, both times, by the way, I was convinced it was racially or ethnically motivated, which is against about 100 laws, where I saw buyers denied approval by a condo. It was outrageous. It was against the law, and it was almost impossible for the buyer to prove that. Now, that was a long time ago. I haven't seen it recently, but I've seen that twice, and I think both times I called major BS on the disapproval of the buyer. Having said that, is that property related? Yes. It's bigot related too, which is a sad state of affairs, but it's property related. That would be a way, in my view, to get out. Some good questions, guys. I bet those are some really good ones. All right, moving on here. Anything else? Exactly. Oftentimes, there's simple, still bureaucratic conditions. I know, holding stuff up, stupid stuff. And all I can tell you is the FAR Bar Committee says, if it ain't property related, then you can't, what the contract says, if you're whatever bureaucratic condition, and they always blame you, don't they? If it can't be met, it's your fault, right? which it isn't, but they blame you anyway. If some condition somebody's got to make a determination. Is it property related or is it not, right? And at the end of the day, if there's a fight over it, a judge or jury's got to decide, look, this was property related or no, this was not. All right, condo. Condo approval issue. Seller would only allow extension if the buyer would pay penalty to extend. Yeah.
That was
I
the
hear
follow-up to the litigation conditions.
Yeah, I hear you. And that smacks of extortion to me. And I think that I told you that's property related. So if you can't get approved, then you can cancel. But the buyer didn't want to cancel, it sounds like. They wanted the deal. So I could see a seller doing that. I could. And saying, no, you got to close. That may be property related. You got to close. Okay. You can cancel and get your deposit back, but I'm not extending. So they basically had to pay him some blood money, it sounds like. And I see that all the time. So did the seller have to allow an extension? No. So I can see them doing that. I'm not surprised they did that. Would an addendum to extend the closing date keep the seller able to keep the EMD, even if that's after the 3 days beyond the loan approval period? Yes, I think it would. Would an extension without an addendum, without an addendum to extend the closing date, would the seller be able to keep the earnest money deposit even if it's after the 3 days beyond the loan approval period? Well, yes, because let's look at it. The contract says, look, if you don't satisfy the property related, if you again, you can only get look, you got the loan approval, right? Or you said that what? You were satisfied with your ability to do it, right? And eventually you got it. It says that the seller, okay, you get your deposit back if the property related conditions are not met, but you don't get it back if non-property related conditions aren't met. So yes, can the seller keep the EMD even if it's after 3 days beyond the loan approval period? The short answer is yes. Let's look at that. It says it right here. My view, based on that, it says if buyer has timely provided the notice of getting loan approval or satisfied with the ability, and buyer then fails to close, period, the deposit's paid to seller. Buyer loses the deposit unless the failure to close is due to seller default or property related. That's it. So if it's not property related reasons for that the buyer did not close, as far as I'm concerned, the seller can get the deposit. Now, here's another question, because I taught this class to a bunch of realtors late last year when it first came out. Let's look at this business again. Look at this business again, where it talks about this funky business where it says, again, line 113. Again, let's review. If within the loan approval period, the 30 days, buyer obtains loan approval, buyer shall notify seller in same of writing prior to the expiration period. Then this is again the new part, line 112. Or if buyer is unable to obtain the loan approval period, within the loan approval period, all undefined. Again, they don't define loan approval. It's undefined. What is loan approval? I don't know. It doesn't define it. But buyer is satisfied with buyer's ability to get loan approval and proceed to closing. Well, okay, they're satisfied with their ability to get loan approval. Guess what? What if they don't? What happens then? They don't get it. They don't get loan approval, period. It doesn't. Guess what? It kind of addresses that, and we just went over it. It says if buyer has timely provided either notice, and either notice is receipt of loan approval or satisfied with ability to get it, and then buyer doesn't close. Why didn't they close? They didn't eventually freaking get it, the damn loan approval. They didn't get it. Guess what? Deposit's paid to seller, period. So you may be satisfied with your ability to get loan approval, but if you don't get it, guess what? Deposits paid to seller. Why? We don't even get to the whole point where were you not able to meet property related conditions of the loan approval? There were no conditions of a loan approval because you never got it. See what I'm saying? So you need to be super duper uber careful about this business, like I said, of saying I'm satisfied with my ability to get loan approval. Because if you ultimately don't, you lose your deposit, folks. Not friendly, not fun. They're going to blame you and scream at you. And here's my 5, 10 grand, 30 grand, whatever they lost. They're not going to be happy. And they're going to get mad at you. And one of those lawyers that advertises during Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy or Family Feud might sue you. Do you want that? I've sent nasty grams to people like you. Okay. Not anybody on this Zoom call, but maybe a colleague of yours somewhere. I doubt you liked getting that letter. I can be pretty nasty when I want to be. They teach us how to do that in law school. Be a jerk when necessary. That's what they teach us. I'm sorry. It's the reality. All right. Yeah, here's somebody. I agree. Again, satisfied is not an abs. I agree. What the heck does that mean? I'm satisfied with my ability? Okay, well, I don't know. Before I got married, I was satisfied I'd meet some girls, and I kind of rarely did. Okay? I mean, what does that mean? Satisfied with ability. I could be satisfied with my ability to drive until I get in a wreck. I mean, what does that mean? It's an ambiguous term. If I were on the committee, I would have argued against that. I would have argued against this business of satisfied with ability to get it. I just think that's too loosey-goosey and too ambiguous. And it's not even a legal term, really, is it? Satisfied with my ability. I've been satisfied. I'm satisfied with my ability to play quarterback. Guess what? I ain't no Tom Brady. All right. So, I mean, really? So what else? What is your view of seller agreeing to sign an extension, but if only if buyer agrees to unconditionally release the deposit? I'm fine with that. Yeah, it says here, what is your view of sellers agreeing to sign an extension, but only if buyer agrees to unconditionally release the deposit? Folks, everything is negotiable. I teach the full FAR contract all the time. And here's what I tell everybody. Treat every sentence in all these contracts with the following. Pretend in your brain the following words are in front of every single sentence of the FAR contract. And that is the following words. Unless otherwise agreed to by the parties in writing, comma. It's all negotiable. And I know that, so you can negotiate that I'll get you an extension, but I'm getting your deposit now, or if you don't close within this date, your deposit's gone, non-refundable. I'm okay with that. I know the seller may feel like the seller has a jackboot to your neck, but that's the market that we're in. Folks, do you hate markets like this? I do too. The power paradigm is, it's off kilter. It's shifted too far to the sellers. I don't like markets like this because it leads to abuses, basically legal abuses, but they're still abuses, right? This business of, I'm not going to extend unless you do this, that, or the other. I don't like markets like this. I don't like it whenever there's this kind of a power imbalance. I don't control the market. You don't. None of us do. None of us control the market. I don't care how hot you think you are, important you are. The market's vastly bigger than any of us. The market's controlled by things like politics, things like pandemics. You know what I mean? There are so many interest rates. The Fed sets interest rates. International conditions. We don't create market conditions. I'll never forget. And just when you think that you are isolated from the rest of the country, and Florida's different. Well, they used to say that in California. Oh, we've got a diverse economy. We're never going to go into recession. Then California hit a terrible recession years ago. Never believe anybody that says, well, it's different here. Everybody wants to live here. People do want to live here. And it is less, we're less hit by some of the seismic financial things. It's one country, folks. And guess what? We're all interdependent. So there's less going on. Somebody says, let's see here, then we'll finish up. In Broward Dade, if the seller does not provide his owner's title insurance, is this a cause for the buyer to get the EMD back after the approval date? I know you're arguing a technicality in the contract because the seller is supposed to send the title insurance, and that's Pearl. That's a clever argument. You can try it. I've tried it. Failure to give title insurance to get my deposit back, and you can try it. And really, when I've tried it, sometimes that's worked, sometimes it hasn't. You can try it saying the seller's in default, we didn't get the title work, right? And Broward is like Lee County, where I practice primarily, is seller pays title. So seller is supposed to give the title documents, and if they don't, you can declare a default and maybe get your deposit back. Not a bad argument. The answer to your question is maybe. Okay, you can make the argument, but you probably have a fight on your hands. The other side crying foul that has nothing to do with the buyer not getting the loan. This is a legal document. Why did they use non-legal terms? These periodic changes are causing nothing but confusion in the industry. Where is FAMP? Where is FAR? We need new minds in these seats. I agree. I agree. What did I tell you at the top of the class? They always change this thing every 3 to 5 years. And lucky you, they always rewrite the financing section. And they always improve it in some ways and make it worse in some ways. I think they improved it in some ways. What I don't like is that they now say this whole business about the appraisal up front. I think you're asking for trouble. You know you can't always get appraisals that quickly. And it's really not fair if it doesn't appraise on the back end. You lose your deposit. It specifically says that now. That's a major change. It used to say, again, if it didn't appraise on the back end, in other words, if after the loan approval period, if it didn't appraise, it used to say you can get your deposit back. Now it specifically says you can't if it doesn't appraise. Appraisal issues have to be addressed within the 30 days. I disagree with that. I don't think that makes sense, and I doubt you do either. And then the next thing that I don't like, again, is this satisfied with ability. Not a legal term. Don't really know what it means. It's not defined. Define satisfaction, right? I can't get no satisfaction, said Mick Jagger. He didn't define it because you can't define it, right? What does that mean? It's not a legal term. Look that up in Black's Law Dictionary. Satisfaction or satisfied. Okay, you'll probably see a little laughter emoji if you look that up. Okay, in Black's Law Dictionary, you'll be laughed at by the dictionary. Okay, last question, then we got to roll. Glenn, regarding seller paid closing cost question, Section 9, seller picks closing agent pays owner's policy. Agreed. Used to be owners was the expensive policy and lenders was reissue. Sounds like this is switched and seller gets to pick, but the buyer still pays for the more expensive lender's policy. No, no, that hasn't changed. The more expensive policy is the owner's policy, and the simultaneous issue is the lender's policy. Okay, so I think what you're getting at, Glenn, and I teach a class on 8 things. I'm teaching it in Fort Myers early March. 8 things you didn't know about title insurance. And I own the class. I teach it. I think that what you're getting at is the lender's policy. Did you know? A lot of you didn't know this. So the owner's policy, title policy is the more expensive one. You cannot upcharge the owner's policy. Don't listen to anybody who says owner's policy title rates are set by state law. No. For the owner's policy, the maximum you can charge is set by state law, the infamous promulgated rate. Sounds official, doesn't it? Promulgated. All that means is that's the maximum you can charge by state law. But what a lot of people don't know is a title company can upcharge the lender's policy. And I talk about that in my class. They can upcharge it. There's no prohibition of doing that. So I think that's what you're talking about. I think that's what you're getting at. Okay. In other words, the seller picked, but buyer still pays for the more expensive loan. Is this right? Or should the seller pay the higher title charge when they choose it? Fair question, Glenn. You're asking some good ones. And all I'm saying is that nothing in the, here's your scenario, like it is in Lee County and it is in Broward County and it is in Palm Beach County, right? Seller picks the title company as the custom. Seller therefore pays the owner policy, which is the more expensive one. But then it's usually under one roof. The lender gets a lender policy called a simultaneous issue. And then the title company upcharges that. The promulgated rate for that is $25 for the lender's policy, because it's just merely a duplicate of the owner's. But there's no rule against upcharging that $25. And your question is, does the seller have to pay that? And nothing in that upcharge, and nothing in the contract says that. So that's a good question. A lot, folks, I'll bet you a lot of you don't even know that a title company can upcharge the simultaneous issue policy for the lender. I'll bet you a lot of you don't know that. I go over that in my class. Unfortunately, it's going to be live. So unless you're in Fort Myers, you can't take the class. It's going to be a live class in Fort Myers where I teach a class that I own, 8 things you didn't know about title insurance. I tell all the cute little secrets about the industry. Okay, so have you ever seen buyers not to take the optional owner's policy? I never have. You lenders require a policy, and I've never seen one do that. How could we know the real price for the lender's policy? Good question. Ask the title company. Isn't it cute how even in an Alta closing statement, it's kind of buried, isn't it? It's hard to sort it out. It's really hard to sort it out in a CD, but it's also hard to sort it out in an Alta. Ask them, how much are you charged? Oh, by the way, endorsements can be upcharged too. They can upcharge the lender's policy. They can upcharge, say, the 8.1 endorsement. That's a promulgated rate of 25. They can upcharge that. And folks, you know what? It isn't too easy to sort it out. There's not a lot of price transparency in the title business. Okay, not a lot. Okay, folks, Mike Pearson, are you going to go ahead and wrap it up for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, Ned, we really appreciate your time. Obviously, a lot of valuable information. We'll send out any information we can to the attendees and registration list. But again, we value the information, and I'm sure we'll be asking you to come on again. There's just
you bet, Mike. I appreciate it.
Folks, undig.
Folks, here's some friendly advice. We went over the contract. I promise you it won't take much of your time. Read the financing section several times. You really need to. Okay, you really need to. It's not that hard. Okay, you don't have to read the whole contract several times. I'm asking you to be the best you can be at your business. Read that paragraph, okay, several times. You'll save money on Ambien or Lunesta or Benadryl or melatonin. It's boring. I don't care. Fall asleep. Best cure for insomnia out there, and then wake up and read it again. You don't have to read, 17 pages. You just have to read one paragraph, but you really need to master the paragraph. You taking this class shows me you give a crap, shows me you want to learn it. And just the way to really learn it is, believe it or not, most of us, we're all self-taught mostly. Is what we read. It's what we learn on our own. Just read the paragraph. Mike, thanks, folks. I'm going to let you all go.
Thank you all for being on the call. If you found value here, I hope you'll consider, if you're not already, becoming a member of the FAMP. We do a lot of these calls, a lot of information. Be looking out for the next call. And if there's any other questions, follow up with us. And again, thank you all for your time. It's 10:05, so have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Do well. Bye.